GLS Solicitors is led by award-winning solicitor Harjap Singh Bhangal. GLS Solicitors, winning experts need an expert.
The minimum income required to apply for a family visa in the UK has risen to £29,000. The Home Office says it's set to increase the target again twice more by spring next year. Well, to talk to us more about this is the immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bhangal. Thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us about what's happening today.
So what's happening is if you basically are a British citizen and want to call your spouse to the UK, previously, since 2012, you needed to earn £18,600 per annum in order to do so. That is hiking up to £29,000 today, ruling out 50% of the UK's earning workforce in that. And it's going up again later on this year, probably around December time, to £34,500.
And to put that into context, the median salary in the UK, £29,700 or so. Have you seen a rise in people looking to get cases filed before this deadline?
Oh, yeah, there's a big rush, and hence this created a bit of a backlog and a bit of a bottleneck. So a lot of people, when these changes were announced initially in December, who wanted to get married later on this year and didn't meet the 29,000, went out in January, February, got married, made their applications, and their applications have already been in this week, even till yesterday. A lot of applications were going in.
So an application put in yesterday, that figure of 18,000 stands despite the rise today?
Indeed.
And who are we talking about? Well, we kind of talk in abstract terms about people and partners, but who's looking to come and come to the UK?
Well, anyone like possibly ourselves even, or possibly your viewers who go abroad, fall in love, and their spouses want to come and make a life with them in the UK. So people coming here to live permanently, although initially a spouse visa is granted for 2.5 years and extended for another 2.5 years, after 5 years, they get permanent settlement, which we call indefinite leave to remain. So it's anyone who wants to live with their British spouse in the UK, essentially.
What are people saying to you about the impact of these changes to them personally?
It's a huge impact. A lot of people will now have to do 2 jobs to try and make that 29,000. A lot of people won't make it at all. So if you're a factory worker in the Midlands and you're earning 22,000, you won't be able to make that up. There is another route where you can amalgamate savings with it, but the amount required is so huge that the average person will not, afford that. Already spouse visa fees are huge, so the government already charge around about £5,500 for just a single application. That's not including any lawyer fees, so you're paying that, which is not refundable. In addition, you have to earn X amount. If you haven't, then you have to have savings of at least around about over 20,000, starting from 20,000, even if you've got a £1,000 deficit. So if you're earning 28,000, the savings you'd have to show is 20,000 on top of that, which you've held for 6 months. That's going to be impossible for a lot of people.
They're big figures. For its part, the government says that migration's too high and that partners shouldn't be kind of a burden on the system here in the UK. That's why they're then also looking to raise this threshold, like you say, 2 more times. With that considered, what are you advising people going forwards?
Well, it's only about 75,000 applications that are made last year. And although that was up on the year before, they don't form a huge part of the people coming over. Now, for the government to punish British citizens and their partners and in order to bring down their migration figures, I don't think that's fair. They should be concentrating on the people who shouldn't be here or shouldn't deserve to be here. And that's the real problem in this country. But anyone who's wanting to fall in love abroad and bring their spouse over, now you've got to make sure you're earning over 29,000 or have huge savings, or have that network of support. You might have to work 2 jobs in order to make that. Just be sure, and a foreign spouse's income can't be included in it. So that's very important. So even if you're marrying a spouse abroad who might be earning 100,000, their income won't be counted into it. You have to sponsor them. They can't sponsor you.
It's complex, to say the least.
It is indeed.
Harjap, thank you so much for coming this morning. Appreciate it. And, of course, always more details on the Money blog on the Sky News website as well.
Well, I can now speak with immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bhangal. Welcome to the show, Harjap. We have this conversation so often, do we not? But this latest set of figures and revelations even surprise me. The fact we can't deport convicted sex offenders because they claim they will face potential violence in their home country would astonish many GB News viewers. Don't forget, of course, Abdulazidi went down a similar route, committed 2 sex offences and yet wasn't deported and went on to commit that heinous crime. Are we placing the human rights of sex offenders before the human rights of British citizens?
Oh, not really. It's that what we're doing is a system with the Home Office is that it's broken. We're not fixing the broken Home Office. The Home Office removal rate graph goes like this. It goes all the way down since 2010. And the fact is that we know who's been in control since 2010. Before that, people were being sent back 60,000 a year, 50,000 a year, even enforced removals, which are removals of people whose case has been rejected. They were in 15,000, 11,000. Since 2010, that went down to last year or the year before to an amazing 2,000, 3,000. Now, the fact is it's up to the government and the Home Office, once somebody's case has been refused and once their appeal's been refused, to actually put somebody on a plane back to the country. We can only put people back onto planes back to their country if we've got return agreements. When we negotiated a certain treaty in 2016, we forgot to do that. That's the problem. So what we've got to do is, this whole system is broken. Anybody who works in the Home Office will tell you that. We know that the fact that our borders aren't secure, we know that people aren't being sent back, we know that cases are taking 2 years to decide. It should take half a day for a trained person to decide a case. It shouldn't take 2 years, Martin, to make a decision. And it's not one case or 5 cases or 10 cases that are waiting 2 years or a year for a decision. It's over 100,000. So in that time, people are staying here, they're allowed to apply again, they can appeal again, and they're creating lives for themselves here. And the longer they stay here, the harder it is to send people back.
Precisely, and again, Harjap, some of these figures are simply eye-watering. 61% of all failed asylum seekers are still in the UK. There's one case here of an African woman who's been trying and failing for 18 years to get the right to remain, and every time she's refused, the Home Office simply ask her if she'd like to leave the country. They don't deport her, they don't do the job, and what we have there is the perfect storm for this constant legal merry-go-round, and nobody ever seems to leave the country.
Yeah, I mean, the removals unit is, probably exhausted, and they're the ones that we need to concentrate on. Firstly, the whole system needs to be, we need to stop the gangs sending people here. We can't stop these gangs who are sending people for the past 20 years from the French coast. All of your viewers know that they start from the French coast. All of your viewers know that they end up on the Kent coast. The UK government doesn't seem to know this and tells us this lie. They're 8 steps ahead of us. Then what the heck is all the intelligence and all of the police force and border force doing that you've got? Not only can't do your job and that you can't stop them, then when they get here, you take a year, 2 years to give them a decision on their claim after they've given an interview in half a day. Then, after their appeal's been refused or their claim's been refused, you don't even send them back. This whole system is broken. So if you're looking at what your punchline today or the tagline is saying Britain's broken asylum system, you're right. Me and you end up talking every other week about this, that this system is broken, yet no action is done. It needs a complete overhaul from top to bottom.
On that, we can agree, my friend. And here's something I'm going to throw at you as an immigration lawyer, which might upset you. £34 million of legal aid has been spent every year since 2017 on asylum cases, according to the Ministry of Justice. Should asylum seekers, particularly those who come to the country illegally, even get legal aid?
Well, they only get a limited amount of legal aid. So a lawyer only gets involved after someone gets refused. When someone's caught at Dover trying to enter the country, no lawyers are called down there, and they're all done. That's all dealt by the Home Office. So £34 million million aid, that's fine. How much are we spending on border force? How much are we spending on Home Office staff? What about them barges that are sitting there empty? What about the 500 million that was spent to Rwanda? How many times more is that than 34 million? Loads. It's more than 10 times was spent on 0 planes to go to Rwanda and to ferry people like Suella Braverman on private first-class planes to go out there and show us. And what about the latest revelation, Martin? That the accommodation that was set aside for the people in Rwanda has been sold off. That tells you that there's no intention to send people to Rwanda. And if there is, it's just a gimmick. And that money, who has been eating that money?
It's this government is responsible for that. British citizens, British companies. What about all the money on the hotels that is being spent daily? Like I said, the whole system is done. It's not lawyers or judges to blame here. It looks like that. This is a whole shambles from the day a person leaves the coast of France to the day the person gets rejected here and is just allowed to roam free in the country. So that, my friend, is on this government. They're in charge. The removal figures have gone down like that. It doesn't matter whether we have Theresa May, David Cameron, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak. Doesn't matter who's been Foreign Secretary or Home Secretary. We've had Priti Patel sell us the Rwanda scheme, Suella shouting from the rooftops, Robert Jenrick. The results speak for themselves. You know the results. You've said the figures, 61%. That's not normal.
No, so that begs the question, though, Harjap Singh Bhangal, is this going to change or get any different under the Labour Party? They're talking tough, but are we just simply looking down the barrel of a system so broken it can't be fixed?
Well, at least Keir Starmer's saying the right things for a start. He's saying he's going to smash the gangs and stop the gangs. That's the correct way to do this. You don't stop drug dealing by locking up the drug users. You go out and get the drug dealers, right? You won't stop people smuggling by locking up asylum seekers. You'll have to catch the people smugglers. And this government has failed to do that. How many people smuggling gangs have they caught in the last 10 years? When do you hear about people smugglers getting life in jail as to deter them? You don't. If they get caught, they get 2 or 3 years, they're out. And they usually have a fall guy. You've got to break the business model of the gangs. A bigger deterrent than this government and the Rwanda scheme is the weather. And that just tells you everything. That our gangs run on whether the weather's good or not. This deterrent scheme, whatever the government said, hasn't worked. At least Labour are saying the right things. And if they do the right things, we'll have to wait and see. But the fact that we can definitely take away is this government has done everything wrong.
OK, Harjap Singh Bhangal, it's hard to disagree with that. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. As ever, channeling pure common sense.
Joining me now is Harjap Singh Bhangal, a UK immigration lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show. You are really in the front line of this migration crisis here in the UK. Do you think there's anything the government can do or should do to stop the boats?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of things that it should do, but it isn't doing. The first thing is to actually let's try and get the gangs or the people who actually put these people on the boats and arrange for them to be smuggled into the UK. You stop drug dealing by locking up the drug dealers, not by locking up the drug users. So by locking up asylum seekers and refugees, you won't stop people smuggling. The only way you're going to stop people smuggling is to try and stop these people smuggling gangs at source or on the way. That requires Europe-wide cooperation. Secondly, there needs to be an overseas processing centre. The only way to claim asylum at the moment is by actually landing here. And that is a selling point for the smugglers. They approach these people and say, you want to claim asylum in the UK? You've got to land there. The only people who can get you there are us. We have the product. Do you want to buy it? And therefore, they are actually creating the policy that we have is actually creating the demand and, as a result, the supply. If there was an overseas processing centre like Italy have now established in Albania with their nearest neighbouring country, and we should have done with France. In fact, France offered it to us, and they even offered us the land and help to open this processing centre, and we actually said no to it. And so that would alleviate a lot of people coming here, especially families. They wouldn't take a risk to get on a boat and cross the channel if they could, in fact, realise that, they can apply while sitting in France. Thirdly, removal rate. So the removal rate since this government came in has been on a downward spiral, and it's gone from like 30, 40,000 down to even 3,000 or 4,000. Recently, it's just gone up a little bit, surprisingly, before the election, after people have created a big row about it. But it's gone down for continuous, regardless of who the Prime Minister was, whether it's Boris Johnson, whether it's David Cameron, whether it's Theresa May. And as a result, people aren't being removed, have been refused. It's taking a year or over a year to process claims, which should be or used to be decided in 15 days.
So, Harjap, let me interrupt you there. You've come up with a few solutions. Now, many of our viewers and listeners won't understand, I know you do, as the immigration guru, as you are known, won't understand the difference between an overseas processing centre and the government's Rwanda policy. So just by way of explanation, effectively what Italy has done in Albania, I'm not sure they've done it yet. I thought it had been held up in the courts, but it may now be happening, is processing people in Albania. And if they succeed in their claim, then they can then go to Italy. What our government, the British government, is proposing, but it's really important we make the distinction here, is that we have a processing centre in Rwanda, but if people succeed in that asylum claim, they remain in Rwanda. And that's the big political debate, actually, in Parliament that we've been having only this week, is about whether it's reasonable, safe or fair to allow people, or to compel people to remain in Rwanda. But you say that actually that would be a big disincentive. So if the government does succeed, and that certainly isn't certain, in getting flights off to Rwanda, the bill hasn't even gone through Parliament yet. If the government does succeed with the Rwanda bill, is it your view that that will be a disincentive for people seeking to come to the UK?
No, I don't think that will disincentivise it at all. The Rwanda scheme has been touted for 2 years. That hasn't stopped the boats coming. In fact, a bigger deterrent is the weather. The weather actually deters more people than the Rwanda scheme. Going in, one plane going to Rwanda with a place of about 300 people. That is not going to deter 47,000 other people from coming.
Let me just say, first of all, people often say that the plan is to expand it to many thousands. So if in fact, once it's proven and it's up and running. The Rwanda-style scheme has been tried by other countries around the world. In fact, the most famous place it was tried was in Australia. They decided to send, when they had an issue with people coming over on boats to Australia, they removed many people to a place called Christmas Island, I think some other places as well. They have 0 people, last time I checked, 0 people on Christmas Island, because as soon as they brought the scheme into force, the boats stopped coming. So isn't it reasonable for the government to say we could hope to see a similar success with the government's Rwanda scheme? I know you say it hasn't worked yet, but it's not the law yet. But in Australia, when it became law and they started doing it, the boat stopped.
Right, let's talk about something that's already tried it with Rwanda, Israel. So Israel tried it and actually sent people to Rwanda. A year later, they sent their inspectors to see where these migrants were. All had been re-trafficked, all except for about maybe 2 had been re-trafficked and were back into the system and in the hands of these gangs. And Rwanda clearly is not the answer. Countries have tried it before and have failed. We need to look at an alternative if we're going to look for this sort of type of scheme to work.
Well, it sounds like
we definitely know that Rwanda...
It sounds like you're quite supportive of the idea of offshore processing. I've made that distinction. It is a really, really important distinction. And I've said before, actually, I think the government, as an interim step, should have offshore processing in countries. And the countries I picked on, just because I know that there has been some discussion, was Morocco, which I think was, did offer to the British government to do it. There are other things the government's doing. Of course, it's given, you say you've got to tackle this people smugglers at source. We've given over £500 million to the French to do that. It doesn't seem to be working in any way whatsoever. But the other way the government believes it can discourage people from coming is to make their life not particularly pleasant when they're here, if I can put it that way. I don't necessarily think it's what the government should be doing. We've got the Bibi Stockholm barge. We've got military camps being converted. Do you think that is a disincentive?
I just don't think any of these schemes hold any water or are working at all. This is coming from a government who actually thought that driving around vans with "Go Home" written on them would make people want to go home. I mean, it's ludicrous in doing that. These barges are not stopping people. They're limited in accommodation. The costs are huge to the taxpayer. We know that. Even a Rwanda scheme is being touted at £2 million per person sent back. If you're going to expand that, I mean, compared to processing an actual applicant, which is 21,000, this is just not viable. Financially, it's just not viable with the numbers that are coming in. The Rwanda scheme no way can handle 47,000 people in a year. That's the sort of numbers we're seeing crossing over in recent years. It's not going to be able to handle that. And it's not going to disincentivize people. I mean, these schemes are just PR stunts at most. What needs to happen is faster processing, faster removals, better trained staff to make better decisions, offshore processing so that people don't make the journey. Some of them still will. It won't stop all of it. It's not a total solution. We need a combination of these things. And to stop the gangs. Like I said, and
there's
this government
nothing-
has failed to stop the gangs.
It may surprise you. There's nothing I actually particularly disagree with you. So I do think Rwanda will work, but I do agree, offshore process, I've said it before on this show, I also agree with removing people immediately if their asylum claim fails. So there is an area of agreement. I think on that fundamental issue about the way forward, though, we may be divided. But thank you very much for joining us here on the show.
Now, in a slightly related subject, after years and years of negotiations, the European Parliament has finally approved a major reform tightening the EU's rules on migration and asylum. The EU Asylum and Migration Pact will apparently speed up the asylum process and boost the return of irregular migrants to home countries and require EU member states to share responsibility for asylum seekers. But is it that simple? Let's speak now to immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bhangal and prospective Reform UK parliamentary candidate, former MEP himself, Mr. Rupert Lowe. A very good evening to both of you. Let me start with you, Harjap. I mean, I've read what this sort of pact is supposed to ask countries to do, but it all seems a bit vague. We've got people from Belgium saying, well, we've signed up to it, but we're not really sure it's right. We've got Hungarians saying we don't want any refugees at all. Poland saying we're not really going to buy into this. We've already got figures that suggest that we don't deport anyone anymore, even once they've been refused asylum. So exactly how is this going to change anything, if it is?
Well, it's a bit of a mix at the moment, and you're right, there is a sort of disagreement between the states themselves. However, the broad consensus is that, okay, 380,000 people illegally crossed into the EU last year, and something has to be done about it. And elections are coming up. And as we know, election is a time of promises, is a time when people fear for the change of loss of their seats and a change of government. And therefore, to hold on to power, people have to really try and deliver, or promise at least to deliver what the public wants. And if this is what the public wants, to stop illegal migration, then this is what they're going to have to agree on. I mean, what the details are a bit sketchy. They're saying, well, hold on, we're going to process all the claims within 12 weeks. And if they're rejected, within another 12 weeks, we're going to send people back. How exactly they're going to do this, in what numbers they're going to do this, what mechanism they have, is all something that's going to be in the detail. But right, the general consensus is it has been passed.
Yes, it has. And it doesn't really explain where all of these people will in fact be processed. Rupert, you've been in the European Parliament, so you know how it works. I mean, what do you make of this particular sort of what I would regard as a bit of a botched job, really?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Mike. I mean, when I was in the European Parliament, they were constantly banging on about this. It's not new. As Harjap says, I mean, this is a response to the fact that the right-wing parties in Europe are beginning to gain substantial ground. And I think the sort of post-war elite who, as you know, have basically embraced open borders, multiculturalism and everything that's showing signs of failing badly. As you quite rightly say, Hungary is not going to play ball with this. I suspect several other members of the 27 won't either. And they haven't got the structure, in my opinion, to deal with any form of tightening of the security of their borders. So I mean, words are easy, but I always say, as you know, watch what the hands are doing, not what the mouth is saying. And as usual in Europe, the mouth says a lot, but the hands do very little.
Well, quite. And Harjap, I mean, one of the, I suppose, warning sort of signs for this particular act is that it talks about, countries taking responsibility for asylum seekers, meaning presumably that the EU will attempt to distribute people across various different countries. Now, presuming that we're not now part of the EU, Britain wouldn't necessarily sign up to that, or it might do, but they're saying they're trying to protect the frontline countries like Spain, Greece and Italy, who do bear the brunt of sort of a lot of this migration initially from the North African coast. What do you see inside of this distribution sort of scenario that it would mean for Britain?
I think for Britain's at the moment is fairly safe because we're not part of the EU anymore. We're not part of its pact anymore. However, like we said, I mean, like Rupert said, will countries like Romania, Hungary, Poland, essentially the ascension countries, as we call them, accept it? Because it's notorious there, that asylum seekers aren't that welcome. There are riots and clashes between, the population, the residents there, and asylum seekers. And therefore, is this distribution going to work? Well, the alternative is given in the pact that if you don't want to take on any migrants, then you're going to have to cough up a bit more and help the countries economically that do, almost like a fine, in effect, saying, well, hold, you can, if you don't want any, then this is the X amount you can do. You can waive off your amount that you're supposed to take on. However, if these countries, or will these countries, will they be able to pay? What effects will it have on their economy? I think for Britain, it can only be a good thing for Britain if Europe are trying to stop illegal migrants coming into Europe and hence the trickle down into Britain from a point of view of not letting people in small boat crossings. However, Britain's problem is removal. Like you said, the removal of migrants. That has not been happening. Under this government, the removal spiral chart is downward spiral. It's, we've gone from 11,000, 10,000 enforced removals. Enforced removals are those when we force people to go back after their claims have been rejected, from 2010 to almost 2 years ago, less than 2,000. So removals is a huge problem for the UK. And until we get a grip on that, we're not going to see a lot of figures go down. Our problem is a lot of people who do get rejected and then just go underground and stay in the system or are allowed to apply again.
Well, that is exactly the problem. And Rupert, let me come on to you with that, because we've got a new report out today which says that 2/3 of applicants who were refused asylum in this country were not recorded as having left the UK in the decade from 2011. So basically, over the last sort of 13 years, even if you are refused asylum, even if you refused it more than once, you don't end up leaving the country. Because if you do finally get granted asylum, you stay, and if you don't, you just disappear into the sort of the dark corners of wherever.
Well, Mike, we've been over this before on a number of occasions
certainly have.
Together, and the country hasn't got the will to deal with this. We've got a woke judiciary that basically defeats the government at every possible juncture they can. They're completely out of touch with the will of the British people. And as we know, in my constituency in the West Midlands, when I was an MEP, there were hotels being taken over, the structure of society was being damaged. The cost to the taxpayer is massive. I think there was a report today saying it's cost 4.3 billion in 2023 to deal with this illegal immigration issue. Well, we then hear Rachel Reeves banging on about how she's going to fleece productive Britain and the tax evaders. As you quite rightly said earlier, they do nothing to the people who are porking the system for benefits and everything else. It's productive England and Britain that they want to attack. And they send HMRC into action to resile on EIS approvals they've given, to damage AIM VCT funds, and do all the things that they do to basically destroy enterprise in the country. So, it's no coincidence 4.3 billion plays the 5 billion that Rachel Reeves has been claiming Middle England isn't paying in tax. So, look, I mean, Middle England's very patient, Mike, but I think when you see the Reform Party going up in the polls, which is almost unheard of in the way that it is, the government, the elite, the establishment, they didn't deliver Brexit despite the fact that people were given a vote on it. They're not delivering a control of our borders, even though we've left the EC. And, that was the right decision for the country, in my opinion. The problem is we haven't got the apparatus. After 44 years in the European Union, our establishment has become flabby, it's become wet, and it's just not fit for purpose. And I think everybody can now see that. So I watch with horror as a sovereign nation with effectively a sea surrounding it finds it impossible to manage its own borders. And indeed, we watch the French fleece us for $500 million and do nothing.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. Rupert, thanks very much indeed. Rupert Lowe there, prospective parliamentary candidate. Harjap Singh Bhangal, we're out of time, I'm afraid, but thanks very much to both of you.
Now, moving on, thousands of migrants unlawfully living in the UK will be offered up to £3,000 to voluntarily move to Rwanda. Under new legislation proposed by the government, migrants will also receive housing and support when they arrive in the African country, but only if they go there by choice. The new deal was agreed with Rwanda earlier this year and responds to the legal challenges faced by the controversial deportation scheme. Joining me now, immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bhangal is with us. Harjap, good afternoon to you. I didn't even know such a scheme like this exists. Apparently, it already does. 19,000 people apparently last year took up this offer of 3,000 quid. This is a little different, of course, because this will be the first time people have been able to go to a third country, not back to their own country of origin, but somewhere else. Broadly speaking, what do you make of this initiative?
Well, the voluntary return scheme has already been operating, like you said, and it's been operating for many years, operated by the IOM. So if somebody wants to go back home, they've had enough, they've had their lot, they're given a lump sum, or which is staggered over a certain amount of time after they've gone back to help to reintegrate back into their own country. This is slightly different. I mean, the Rwanda scheme is already costing us a lot of money, up to about 500 million. We've already signed up to give 370 million, even if nobody is put on a plane over the cost of 5 years, and 50 million each year thereafter. So even if we sent 300 million people back, it would cost us 1.8 million pound each. On top of that, now we're going to try and coerce people to voluntarily move to Rwanda, whether they've got an option to go home or Rwanda, it's up to them, but we're going to end up paying a sum to them. It's just a last-ditch attempt of this government to try and get somebody on that plane, disregarding all the costs and the implications this could have, and the fact that that money could be spent elsewhere on the NHS, in schools which have got crumbling walls, in NHS a long waiting list, the doctors, the roads with potholes, the councils which are going bankrupt, instead of pulling their funding, investing it in them. It's just signal politics. It's just showing that, hold on, we can do it. We can send this one plane to Rwanda. You know, where they've only got about 300, 400 spaces so far. It doesn't make economic sense at all.
Not only does it not make economic sense, it's unlikely to make sort of immigration policy sense either, because from what we can see, every time there's been an announcement about Rwanda, when it was first announced, the boats didn't stop. When they were talking about getting it, sealed through Parliament at its first stage, the boats didn't stop. Now it's getting closer to where Rishi Sunak hopes that, this thing is really going to happen. The boats haven't stopped. And most people with half a brain cell, Harjap, know that this simply, even if planes were taking off by the day, it won't stop the boats.
Yeah, basically, you're right, Ian. It's just no deterrent here at all. And it's shown that it doesn't, in fact, work. In fact, a bigger deterrent, as we all know, is the weather. So the weather has actually deterred more people than the Rwanda plan has. So the threat of sinking in the channel or a boat capsizing deters people more than the thought of going to Rwanda. And if people have traipsed all over Europe, across borders, evading bullets, evading immigration, evading capture, evading being sent back to their home country, evading death, to get to France, then is the last deterrent of, or maybe they'll put you up on a flight back to Rwanda. You might be one unlucky 300 out of 50,000 crossing a year who might be sent back. Is that really going to deter them? I don't think so. The answer pretty much stares us in the face that processing centres abroad in a neighbouring country are the answer. Italy has just done the same with Albania. It's signed a deal with Albania to set up a processing centre in Albania for anybody who wishes to apply for asylum in Italy. That's their closest neighbour. We were offered to do the same in France. France offered us the land. They offered us the support to do that. We actually rejected it under Priti Patel. We said, no, we don't want to do that. Instead, we pursued this crazy idea, absolutely bonkers idea of trying to send people to Rwanda, which is going to cost us 500 million and not a single person sent. It doesn't make sense. It won't make sense to voters. It doesn't make sense to lawyers. It doesn't make sense to people in the media. And that's because it's actually bonkers. There's no other word for it.
Yeah, you're spot on. I can't in any way counter that. We know the government would say, no, wait and see. I'm sorry, you've given all the arguments there. The wait and see bit has already happened. This isn't going to see the light of day. I think we all know that. Harjap, though, we will speak again, I'm sure, on this contentious issue. Thank you, Harjap Singh Bhangal.
ਭਾਜੀ ਕੱਲ ਹੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸੇ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਅਸੀਂ ਲਾਸਟ ਪੋਡਕਾਸਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਘਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ ਸਰੂਪ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਆ ਕੌਂਸਲ ਟੈਕਸ ਬਚਾਉਣ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਉਹੀ ਰਾਗੀ ਸਿੰਘ ਮੰਗਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਇੱਕ ਧੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਰਿਲੇਟਡ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ
ਕਿ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਕੁ ਸਨਮਾਨ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੁੱਦਾ ਵੀਰੇ ਨੇ ਗਿੰਦੇ ਵੀਰੇ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ
ਹਾਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ
ਕਿ ਇਹ ਰਿਐਲਿਟੀ ਹੈ
ਇਹ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ 15 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਢੋਲ ਵੀ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਸਹੁਰਾ ਮੰਗਾ ਲਿਆ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ? ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਲੋਫਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਰੱਖ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਤੇ ਲੋਫਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ ਉਹ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ, ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਡੈਡੀ ਨੂੰ ਗ੍ਰੰਥੀ ਬਣਾ ਲਿਆ। ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਲੱਗਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਦਿਹਾੜੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਸ਼ੌਪ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ, ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਆ ਮੱਖਣ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ, ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਹਾਂ, ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਪੱਕਾ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਾ। ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਬੜਾ ਹੈਰਾਨ, ਸਰਦਾਰ ਮੁੰਡਾ, ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਛਕਿਆ। ਮੈਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਤੇਰੇ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਛਕਣ ਦਾ ਕੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ।
ਭਾਜੀ ਘਰੇ ਮੁਰਗੇ ਰਿੱਝਦੇ ਆ, ਕਿਰਾਏ ਤੇ ਮੁੰਡੇ ਰੱਖੇ ਹੋ, ਕੋਈ ਸਿਗਰਟਾਂ ਪੀਂਦਾ, ਕੋਈ ਹੁੱਕਾ ਪੀਂਦਾ, ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਪੀਂਦਾ, ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਸ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ।
ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਤੇ ਹੈਰਾਨ ਆ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੌਮ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਆਪਾਂ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਉਠਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ, ਆਪਾਂ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਉਠਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ, ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਨਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਚੁੱਪ, ਸਾਰੇ ਚੁੱਪ। ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਉਠਾਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਆ ਨਾ, ਅੱਧੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੇਅਦਬੀ ਰੋਜ਼ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਇਹ ਕੀ ਬੋਲਣ? ਅੱਧੇ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇਦਾਰ ਦਾ ਕੰਟਰੈਕਟ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਕਰਾ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਆ। ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਆ ਕੇ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਭਾਈ ਕੋਈ ਜੁਗਾੜ ਲਾ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਆਹੀ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਭਾਜੀ ਦੱਲਾ ਤਾਂ ਵਕੀਲ ਦੀ ਕੰਫਿਊਜ਼ਨ ਹਲੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ 'ਚ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ, ਹੈ। ਬਟ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਗਲਤ ਆ, ਇਹ ਜੋ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ। ਔਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਕ੍ਰੈਕਡਾਊਨ ਵੀ ਅੱਛਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਔਰ ਲੋਕ ਜੇਲ੍ਹ ਵੀ ਗਏ। ਇੱਕ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਜੇ ਬਰੈਡਫੋਰਡ ਹਡਰਸਫੀਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਰੇਡ ਕੀਤੀ ਆ, ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਸ਼ੌਪ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਸ਼ਰਾਬ ਤੇ ਸਿਗਰਟਾਂ ਵੇਚੀਆਂ ਸੀ ਉੱਤੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਰਜਿਸਟਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ। ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਐਂਟਰੈਂਸ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਸੀ, ਉੱਥੇ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਉਹ ਦੇਖੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਤਾਂ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਆਏ ਮੁੜੇ ਨਹੀਂ, ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਜੀ ਗਏ, ਚੱਕ ਲਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ, ਟਿਲ ਤੇ ਬੈਠੀ ਬੋਰੀ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਸੀਗਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ ਜੀ ਕਰਤੀ ਜੇਲ੍ਹ 5-5 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੀ।
ਚਲੋ ਕਈ ਤਾਂ ਨੋਟਿਸ 'ਚ ਆ ਗਏ, ਪਰ ਭਾਜੀ ਕਈ ਤਾਂ ਨੋਟਿਸ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਏ।
ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਬ ਫੜੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ, ਸਾਬ ਫੜੇ ਜਾਣਗੇ, ਸਭ ਫੜੇ ਹੋ ਗਏ। ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਾਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕੇਅਰ 'ਚ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਵੀਜ਼ੇ ਲੱਗ ਰਹੇ ਫਰੋਡ ਹੁੰਦੇ, ਕਰਤਾ ਨਾ ਸਫਾਈ, ਸਾਰੀ ਸਫਾਈ ਕਰਤੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ 'ਚ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਕੰਟਰੈਕਟ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਆਦੇ, ਕਰਤਾ ਨਾ ਜਨਵਰੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਸਫਾਈ।
ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਬੰਦ ਹੋਏ ਆ ਜੀ।
ਹਾਂ ਆਫ ਕੋਰਸ, ਕਿਉਂ ਕੰਟਰੈਕਟ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ, ਔਰ ਕੰਟਰੈਕਟ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ, ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨੀ, ਬੰਗਲਾਦੇਸ਼ੀ, ਨਾਈਜੀਰੀਅਨ, ਇਹ 4 ਮੁਲਕ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਫਰੋਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਐਨ ਟੌਪ ਤੇ ਆ। ਸੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਭਾਰਤ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਕਦੇ ਮੈਡਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਦੀ, ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਤੇ ਗੋਲਡ ਲੈ ਗਏ ਜੀ। ਹਾਂ, ਤਾਂ ਸਟੇਟਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਾਈਏ, ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੇ ਗੁਜਰਾਤ, ਇਹ 2 ਸਟੇਟ ਸੀਗੇ ਜੋ ਫਰੋਡ ਨੇ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਝਾਰਖੰਡ ਵੱਲ ਜਾਓ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ। ਉੜੀਸਾ ਵੱਲ ਜਾਓ, ਨਾ ਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਖੁਆਇਸ਼ ਆ। ਮਹਾਰਾਸ਼ਟਰ ਵੀ ਬੜਾ, ਦਿੱਲੀ ਵੀ ਇਜ਼ ਨੋਟ ਐਸਾ। 2 ਸਟੇਟਾਂ 'ਚ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਅੱਗ ਲੱਗੀ ਹੋਆ। ਔਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਹੱਦ ਤੱਕ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਦਾ ਫੁੱਲ ਫਾਰਮ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਾਂ ਹੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ, VISA ਹੁੰਦੀ ਨਾ ਸਪੈਲਿੰਗ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ, ਵੇਚ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਆਪਣਾ। ਆਇਆ ਫੁੱਲ ਫਾਰਮ, ਇੱਥੇ ਸਭ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਅਸੂਲ ਵੇਚ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਇੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਚ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਚ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਾਂ ਭੈਣ ਨੂੰ ਵੇਚ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਖੁਦ ਦੇਖੇ, ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਸਕੇ ਭੈਣ ਭਰਾ ਵਿਆਹ ਕੀਤੇ ਹੋਏ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਜਾਣ ਲਈ ਫੜ ਹੋਏ, DNA ਟੈਸਟ ਮੰਗਦੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੇ। ਆਹ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਵੱਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ। ਔਰ ਪੇ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਕਿ ਹਰਜਾਪ ਇਹ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਵਿਆਹੇ ਹੋਇਆ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਵੀਜ਼ਾ ਰਿਫਿਊਜ਼ ਅਟਕ ਗਿਆ, DNA ਟੈਸਟ ਮੰਗਦੇ ਆ। ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਫਿਰ ਦੇ ਦਿਓ, ਹਸਬੈਂਡ ਵਾਈਫ ਆ, ਦੇ ਦਿਓ। ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਦਈਏ ਤਾਂ ਭੈਣ ਭਰਾ ਸਕੇ। ਅਤੇ ਹੋਈ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਕਿ ਅਫਸਰ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਕਰਦਾ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਲੈ ਕਿ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਯਾਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਰੰਗੇ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਆ, ਸ਼ਕਲ ਮਿਲਦੀ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਟੈਸਟ ਦਿਓ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਗੜਬੜ ਲੱਗਦੀ। ਉਹਨ ਤਾਂ ਅੰਦਾਜ਼ਾ ਲਾਇਆ ਕਿ ਕਜ਼ਨ ਹੋਊ, ਚਾਚੇ ਤਾਏ ਦੇ। ਪਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਹਟਦੇ, ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਜੀ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਾਹਨੂੰ ਛੱਡਣਾ, ਆਪਾਂ ਰਿਸਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੈਣਾ ਕੋਈ। ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚ ਕਹੂਗੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਸ ਹੱਦ ਤੱਕ, ਹਾਂ, ਕਿ ਅਗਲੇ ਨੂੰ ਮਜਬੂਰ ਕੀਤਾ। ਜੋ ਸਹੀ ਸਕੀਮਾਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ, ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਬਦਲਦੇ ਕਿਉਂ ਆ? ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਬਿਊਜ਼ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ। ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਸਕੀਮਾਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਬੜੇ ਸ਼ਰਾਫਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਭਲਾ ਹੋ ਜੂ, ਜੈਨੂਇਨ ਪੀਪਲ ਆਉਂਦੇ। ਆਪਾਂ ਸਕੀਮ ਦੀ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਨਾ ਮਾਂ ਭੈਣ, ਅਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਜਬੂਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਖਤਮ ਹੀ ਕਰ ਦਿਓ, ਤਾਂ ਅਗਲੇ ਵੀ ਖਤਮ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ। ਅਗਲਾ ਕਾਹਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਰੱਖੇ ਤਰਸ। ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਜੋ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਘੱਟ ਤਰਸ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਫਿਰ ਆਪੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਫਿਰ ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਇਨੋਸੈਂਟ ਆ, ਲੁੱਟ ਗਏ, ਮਾਰ ਗਏ, ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਨੇ ਮਾੜਾ ਕੀਤਾ। ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਨਾਲ ਚੰਗਾ ਕੀਤਾ? ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉੱਥੋਂ day 1 ਤੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਐਪਲੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ 'ਚ ਫਰੋਡ ਆਇਆ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਕਰਾ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਲੜਕੀ ਦੀ ਤੱਕ ਤੋਂ ਸੌਦਾ ਕਰਤਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ। ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਵਧੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਇਹ, ਪਰ ਹੈ ਸਹੀ। ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਧੀ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਲ ਲਾਤਾ 15 ਲੱਖ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੀ ਫੀਸ ਤਾਰ ਦਿਓ, ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਢਿੱਲਾ ਨਾਥ ਮੁੰਡਾ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਨਾਲ ਲਾਇਆ ਨਾ। ਮੈਂ ਹੋਰ ਸੌਦੇ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ?
ਅਸੀਂ ਪ੍ਰਾਊਡ ਫੀਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਭਾਜੀ। ਮੈਂ ਨਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਮੁੰਡੇ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ ਦੇਖੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆ ਕੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਆਈਲੈਟਸ ਤੋਂ ਆਇਆ, ਤੇ ਕਿੱਡਾ ਕੁ ਤੀਰ ਮਾਰ ਲਿਆ। ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਜੋਗੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾਲ, ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੌਬ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਭਣ ਜੋਗੇ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੱਭਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਜੌਬ ਮਿਲੇ,
ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਵਾਨੀ ਵਾਧੂ ਦੇਣੀ ਨਹੀਂ
ਜੀ।
ਸਾਡੇ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਸੀ ਭਾਜੀ, ਆਇਆ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਅੱਗੇ ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ, 12ਵੀਂ ਉਹਨੇ ਕੀਤੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ, ਇਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਆ ਗਿਆ 12ਵੀਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੇਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਪੈਣੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਇਦਾਂ ਆਉਣਾ, ਤੂੰ ਡਾਕੂਮੈਂਟ ਲੈਣੇ ਆ BRP। ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੇਲ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ, ਉਹ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੀ।
ਕਿਤੇ ਕਹਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਫੀਮੇਲ ਦਾ ਪਤਾ, ਈਮੇਲ ਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਭਾਈ।
ਬਾਥਰੂਮ 'ਚ ਨਹਾਉਣ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ, ਕਈਆਂ ਨੇ ਹੁਣ ਮਜ਼ਾਕ ਉਡਾਉਣਾ, ਸੱਚੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ, ਕਸਮ ਲੱਗੇ ਪ੍ਰਮਾਤਮਾ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਭਾਜੀ ਉਹ ਹੈਂਡ ਵਾਸ਼ ਨਾਲ ਨਹਾਈ ਗਿਆ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਲਿਕੁਇਡ ਅੰਦਰ ਨਾ, ਉਹ ਭਾਜੀ 2 ਮਹੀਨੇ ਹੈਂਡ ਵਾਸ਼ ਨਾਲ।
ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸੈਨੀਟਾਈਜ਼ਰ ਫੜਾ ਦੇਣਾ ਸੀ, ਉਹ ਥੋੜਾ ਪਤਲਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਹਾਂ, ਨਾਲ ਜਰਾਸੀਮ ਤਾਂ ਮਰਦੀ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਾਲ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆ।
ਸਾਡੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਦੀ ਮੈਂਟੈਲਿਟੀ ਦੇਖੋ, ਇੰਡੀਆ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਟਰੱਕ ਡਰਾਈਵਰ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਸ਼ਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਕੁੜੀ ਦਾ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੀ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਅਮਲੀ ਨੇ। ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਸਾਰੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ, ਬਹੁਤ ਚੰਗੇ ਆ ਡਰਾਈਵਰ, ਕਹਿਣਗੇ ਜੀ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਅਮਲੀ, ਐਸੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਜੀ ਟਰੱਕ ਵਾਲੇ ਵੱਲ। ਜੇ ਟਰੱਕ ਚਲਾਉਂਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ, ਅਮਰੀਕਾ 'ਚ ਜਾਂ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ 'ਚ, ਫਿਰ ਝੱਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ।
ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਦੇਖ, ਟਰੱਕ ਚਲਾਉਣਾ ਕੋਈ ਮਾੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਹਾਂ ਸਰਵ ਕੋਈ ਬੰਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦਾ, ਆਪਾਂ ਵੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਆ। ਪਰ ਗੱਲ ਇਹ ਆ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਵਿਆਹ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਉੱਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਜੇ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਆਵੇ, ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਨਾਲ ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ। ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ MA ਪੜ੍ਹੀ ਉਹ ਕੁੜੀ ਕੋ 12ਵੀਂ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਸ਼ਤਾ ਕਰ ਲੂਗੀ ਹੈ। 14ਵੀਂ 'ਚ ਮੈਂ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੀ, ਦਿਲ ਲੈ ਗਿਆ +2 ਵਾਲਾ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਗੀਤ ਚੇਤੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਕਿ ਆਹ ਕੋਈ ਕਰ ਦੂਗਾ ਕੋਈ MA ਵਾਲਾ ਜੋ ਕਹੂਗਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਲੈਵਲ ਨਾਲ ਡਾਕਟਰ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਡੈਂਟਿਸਟ ਜਾਂ ਜਵਾਈ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੇਚ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਸਭ ਕੁਛ ਆਪਣਾ ਹੈ। ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਤੋਂ ਜੇ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਮੁੰਡਾ ਦਿਮਾਗੀ ਹਾਲਤ ਦਾ ਜੋ ਮੈਂ ਦੇਖਦਾ ਆ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਇੱਕ ਬਾਂਹ ਵਾਲਾ, ਇੱਕ ਲੱਤ ਵਾਲਾ ਚੱਲ ਜਾਵੇ, ਮੈਂ ਗਰੰਟੀ ਕਰਦਾ 50 ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇ ਤਾਂ ਖੜੇ ਪਏ ਕੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਚੰਡੀਗੜ੍ਹ 에ਅਰਪੋਰਟ ਉੱਤਰਦੇ ਪਏ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ। ਇੱਥੋਂ ਬੁੜੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ 70 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ, ਮੈਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ, ਮੈਂ ਖੁਦ ਕੇਸ ਕੀਤਾ। 23 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਲੜਕੀ, 70 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਮਰਨ ਵਾਲਾ ਕੁੜੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤੀ 23 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੀ। ਮਤਲਬ ਔਰ ਫਿਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਆਕੜਦੇ ਆ ਆਪਣੀ ਕੌਮ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਾਸਟ, ਸਾਡੀ ਜਾਤ, ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤੇ ਵੱਡ ਵਡਾਂਗੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ 'ਚ ਇੰਟਰਕਾਸਟ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਹੋਵੇ ਵਗੈਰਾ। ਨਾ ਜੀ ਨਾ,
ਉੱਥੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਾਸਟ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੁੱਛੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ।
ਕਾਸਟ ਕੀ, ਰਿਲੀਜਨ। ਹਾਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਸਟੇਆਂ ਲੈਣ ਲਈ ਤਾਂ ਧਰਮ ਬਦਲੇ। ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕੇ, ਸਾਡਾ ਮਾਮਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਉਹ, ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮਾਮਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ, ਕੀ ਕਰਨਾ, ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣਾ ਕੁਛ ਸਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਸਕਿਆ। ਸੋ ਆਪਾਂ, ਮੈਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਰੇ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਆ, ਪਰ ਮੈਂਟੈਲਿਟੀ ਇਹ ਆ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਮੈਂਟੈਲਿਟੀ ਇਹ ਆ ਜੋ ਮੈਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਇੰਨੀ ਤੰਗੀ ਵੀ ਆ, ਪਰ ਇੰਨੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਭੇਡ ਚਾਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਫਤਾਰ ਫਾਸਟ, ਪੱਕਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਓ, ਪੱਕਾ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਓ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਹੋ। ਮੈਂ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿ ਦੇਵਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਕੱਚੇ ਰਹਿ ਰਹੇ, ਕਿ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੇ 60 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਬੁੱਢੀ ਆ, ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ 20 ਤਾਂ 25 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ 60 ਸਾਲ ਦੀ ਬੁੱਢੀ ਨਾਲ ਵਿਆਹ ਕਰਕੇ ਪੱਕੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਓਗੇ। ਉਸੇ ਵੇਲੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੇ ਕਾਨੂੰਨ ਰਿਸ਼ੀ ਸੁਨੈਕ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਨੂੰ ਕੱਢ ਦੇਵੇ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਲੈਣ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗੂਗੀ?
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਭਾਜੀ,
ਲੰਡਨ ਤੋਂ ਵੁਲਵਰਹੈਂਪਟਨ ਤੱਕ ਲੈਣ ਲੱਗੂ। ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਊ ਵਿੱਚ, ਲੋਕ ਟੋਲਟ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਜਾਊਗੇ, ਉੱਥੇ ਆਕਸਫੋਰਡ ਰੁਕਦੇ ਆ ਨਾ ਕਰਨ ਨੂੰ, ਟੋਲਟ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਰੁਕਣਾ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਭਾਈ ਛੱਡ ਦੇ ਹੁਣ, ਮਾਈ ਆਉਣ ਦਿਓ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ, ਭੂਆ ਤੂੰ ਆ, ਫੁੱਫੜ ਤੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਹੁਣ, ਮੇਰਾ ਸੋਚ ਕੁਛ। ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਹ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਣਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ। ਹੁਣ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੋਚੀਏ ਯਾਰ, ਮੈਂ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸੋਚਦਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਜਮਾ ਪਲਿਆ, ਪਰ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਬਹੁਤ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਪੰਜਾਬ, ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਯਾਰ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਮਾੜੀ ਹਾਲਾਤ ਹੋਊਗੇ ਕਿ ਲੋਕ ਇੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਮਜਬੂਰੀ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੀ। ਮਜਬੂਰੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਭੇਡ ਚਾਲ ਹੋ ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਲਾਲਚ ਹੋ, ਇਹ 3 ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀਆਂ, ਹੋਰ ਤਾਂ ਕੁਛ ਹੋ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦਾ।
ਭੇਡ ਚਾਲ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਭਾਜੀ, ਮਜਬੂਰੀ ਵੀ ਹੈ,
ਉਹ ਲਾਲਚ
ਵੀ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਤਿੰਨੇ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੇ, ਇਹ ਇਕੱਲੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ, ਇਹ ਤਿੰਨੇ ਨੇ। ਕਈ ਤਾਂ ਦੋ ਨੇ, ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਕਈ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਮਝ ਲਓ ਕਿ ਗਿੰਦੇ ਦਾ, ਜੇ ਮੰਨ ਲਓ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇਦਾਰ ਹੈ ਕੋਈ, ਮੈਂ ਹੀ ਆ ਗਿੰਦੇ ਦਾ ਭਰਾ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਰਹਿਣਾ, ਤੇ ਗਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਹਿ ਦੇ ਨਾ ਭਰਾਵਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਨਾ ਆਈ, ਆਪਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਿੱਧਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਸੜਦਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਤੋਂ।
ਭਾਜੀ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੀ ਹੋਇਆ, ਮੈਂ ਲਾਸਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਪਾਈ ਸੀ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇੰਨੀਆਂ ਗਾਲਾਂ ਕੱਢੀਆਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਤੂੰ ਰੋਕਦਾ, ਤੂੰ ਡੀਮੋਟੀਵੇਟ ਕਰਦਾ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਸੱਚ ਬੋਲਦਾ। ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਤੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਕਰਦਾ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਖੂਹ 'ਚ ਡਿੱਗਿਆ ਹੈ ਉਹੀ ਦੱਸੂਗਾ।
ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਤੂੰ ਬਾਂਟਰ ਮਾਰ ਦਿਆ ਕਰ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਸੁਣਾ ਦਿਆ ਕਰ, ਤੂੰ ਹੀਰੋ ਬਣ ਜਾਣਾ, ਗੱਲ ਖਤਮ। ਤੂੰ ਕਾਹਨੂੰ ਗਾਲਾਂ ਖਾਂਦੇ ਆ, ਉਹ ਆਪਾਂ ਖਾਈ ਜਾਵਾਂਗੇ। ਹਾਂ ਤੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਹਲੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ ਤੂੰ ਹੀਰੋ ਬਣ। ਹਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਦੇਣੇ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਨੂੰ, ਅਗਲੇ ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਿਸ਼ੀ ਮੈਂ ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚ ਹੁਣ ਰਿਸ਼ੀ ਸੁਨੈਕ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਮਿਲਣ ਚੱਲਿਆ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੁਣ ਤੇਰੀ ਤਾਂ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨਗੀ ਲੈ ਜਾਣੀ ਨਵੰਬਰ 'ਚ, ਕਿ ਤੂੰ ਮਾੜੇ ਜਿਹਾ ਕੁਛ ਕਰ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਪੱਕਿਆ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਜੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਤੋਂ ਆਏ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੱਕੇ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਾ ਅਗਲੇ ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਤੱਕ। ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਨਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਵਧੀਆ। ਇਹ ਦਰਅਸਲ ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਅਤੇ ਨੈਗੇਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਰਕ ਆ। ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਆ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਰੀਅਲ ਹੋਵੇ। ਇੱਕ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਕਿ ਹਰ ਚੀਜ਼ ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵ ਹੋਣਾ, ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਬੱਸ ਮੋਰੇ ਖੜਾ, ਉਹ ਬੱਸ ਟਹਿ ਜਾਵੇ, ਮੈਂ ਨਾ ਟਹਿਵਾਂ, ਮੇਰੇ ਸਰੀਰ ਨੂੰ ਸੱਟ ਨਾ ਲੱਗੇ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਮੂਰਖਤਾ ਹੀ ਵੀ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਨੈਗੇਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਮੇਰੇ ਤੋਂ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਮੈਂ ਫੋਨ ਚੱਕਣ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਵਾਂ, ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਮੈਂ ਹੀ ਡਿੱਗ ਜਾਵਾਂ, ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿ ਪਤਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਕਾਬਲੀਅਤ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਫੋਨ ਚੱਕਣ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਡਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਭੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, ਜਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਅੰਡਰ ਐਸਟੀਮੇਟ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ। ਇੱਕ 30 ਗੱਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਰੀਅਲਿਜ਼ਮ, ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਜੋ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ, ਜੋ ਗੱਲ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਰੀਅਲ ਬਣਨਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੋਖਣਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ, ਅੰਦਾਜ਼ਾ ਲਾਉਣਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਕੀ ਪੋਸੀਬਲ ਆ, ਕੀ ਇੰਪੋਸੀਬਲ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਰੀਅਲ ਕੀ ਆ, ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਹੁਣ ਬੱਸ ਦਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਗਜ਼ਾਮਪਲ ਲੈ ਲਈਏ, ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਨੈਗੇਟਿਵ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਬੱਸ ਮੋਰੇ ਖੜਾ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਮਰ ਜਾਵਾਂ, ਪੋਜ਼ੀਟਿਵ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਬੱਸ ਮੋਰੇ ਖੜਾ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਖਰੋਚ ਬਣਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਬੱਸ ਹੀ ਸਾਰੀ ਟੁੱਟ ਜਾਵੇ। ਰੀਅਲਿਜ਼ਮ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਤੂੰ ਬੱਸ ਮੋਰੇ ਨਾ ਖੜ, ਤੇਰੇ ਸੱਟ ਹੋਈ ਨਾ, ਤੇਰੇ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਹੋਈ, ਬੱਸ ਨੂੰ ਲੰਘਣ ਦੇ ਤੇ ਤੂੰ ਆ ਲੰਘ ਜਾ ਬਾਅਦ 'ਚ, ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਸੋ ਆਹ ਤਿੰਨ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਆ। ਆਪਣੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨਾ ਰੀਅਲਿਜ਼ਮ ਸੁਣਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ, ਨਾ ਨੈਗੇਟਿਵਿਟੀ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੋਜ਼ਿਟਿਵਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਦਿਓ, ਅੰਧ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ ਜੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਸੱਦਦੇ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਫਸੋ।
ਅੱਛਾ ਭਾਜੀ, ਅੱਜ ਤੋਂ 2022 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਕੁੜੀ ਦਾ ਫੋਨ ਆਇਆ ਜੀ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ
ਭਾਗਾਂ ਵਾਲਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਫੋਨ।
ਨਹੀਂ ਭਾਜੀ, ਮੇਰਾ ਇਹ ਰਿਹਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਭੈਣ ਕੇ ਕੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੀ ਦੀ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਸਾਰੇ ਚੱਲ ਇੱਜ਼ਤ ਕਰਦੇ।
ਨਹੀਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਵਧੀਆ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀ।
ਤੇ ਭਾਜੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕੁੜੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਭਾਜੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਚਾਚੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਉਣੀ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ। ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸੰਗ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਗੱਲ ਦੱਸਣ ਲੱਗੇ। ਮੈਂ ਦੱਸ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹਦੇ ਚਾਚੇ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ, ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਆਈਆਂ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟ, ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਨਾ ਦੁਕਾਨਾਂ ਮੂਹਰੇ ਪਰਚੀ ਲੱਗੀ ਸਾਊਥ ਹਾਲ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਜੋਬ ਹੈ, ਦੇਖਭਾਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੀ। ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਉਹ ਦੇਖਭਾਲ ਵਾਲੀ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਤੇ, ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਰੁਪਿੰਦਰ ਕੌਰ ਲੜਕੀ ਬੋਲੀ ਫੋਨ ਤੇ, ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਇਲਫੋਰਡ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ ਮਾਲਿਸ਼ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ। ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਗਏ ਤਾਂ ਕਾਲਾ ਉਤਰਿਆ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਪੇਸ਼ੈਂਟ ਕੌਣ ਹੈ? ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਆ। ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਤੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਉੱਤੋਂ ਉਤਰ ਕੇ ਆਇਆ। ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਆ ਜਾ ਅੰਦਰ। ਤੇ ਉਹ ਕੱਪੜੇ
ਤੂੰ ਵੀ ਰੰਗ ਮਾਰੂ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਧਾ ਘੰਟੇ ਨੂੰ।
ਤੇ ਭਾਜੀ ਉਹ ਕੁੜੀ ਵਿਚਾਰੀ ਡਰ ਗਈ, ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਮੈਂ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਲ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗੀ ਆ, ਭੱਜ ਕੇ ਆ ਗਈ। ਉਹਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਭਾਜੀ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ। ਮੈਂ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਬਣਾਈ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਇਦਾਂ ਪਰਚੀਆਂ ਲੱਗਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਫਰਾਡ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਵੀ ਬਚ ਕੇ ਰਹੋ ਭਾਜੀ। ਮੈਂ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਪਾਇਆ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਫੋਨ ਆਏ, ਭਾਜੀ ਇਹ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਡਿਲੀਟ ਕਰ ਦਿਓ, ਸਾਡੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਤਾਂ ਡਰਦੇ ਪਏ ਆ ਸਾਰੇ, ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਇਹ ਡਿਲੀਟ ਕਰੋ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਪਾਉਣਾ, ਵੀ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਡਿਲੀਟ ਕਰਦਾ। ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਹੋਰ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਫਸਣ। ਫਿਰ ਭਾਜੀ 6 ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਹੋਰ ਦੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਆਏ, ਭਾਜੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੋਇਆ। 2 ਨੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਕੰਮ।
ਭਾਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਚਲੋ 2 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਊਗਾ 2009-10 'ਚ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਪਰਦਾਫਾਸ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ BBC ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਲ ਕੇ। ਇੱਕ ਔਰਤ ਸੀਗੀ ਇਲਫੋਰਡ 'ਚ, ਅਮਰਜੀਤ ਭਾਬੀ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਹੋਊਗਾ, ਮਸ਼ਹੂਰ ਬਹੁਤ ਕਲਿੱਪ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ। ਉਹ ਇਲਫੋਰਡ ਲੇਨ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੱਦ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਧੰਦਾ ਕਰਵਾ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ। ਬੜੀ ਓਪਨਲੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਜੀ 60 ਤੇਰੇ 40 ਮੇਰੇ, ਇੱਦਾਂ ਬੜੇ ਓਪਨ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ BBC 'ਚ ਫਸੀ ਉਹ, ਤੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਪਰਦਾਫਾਸ਼ ਹੋਇਆ। ਉਹ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੰਟਰਵਿਊ ਕਰਾਏ, ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਪਤਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛਿਆ ਗਿਆ BBC ਨੇ ਕਿ ਤੇਰੇ ਗਾਹਕ ਕੌਣ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ, ਪਤਾ ਕੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ? ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਗਾਹਕ ਫੌਜੀ ਆ, ਆਪਣੇ ਹੀ ਬੰਦੇ ਜੋ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਗਾਹਕ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ। ਆ ਅਸਲੀਅਤ 'ਚ ਸਾਊਥ ਹਾਲ ਦਾ ਇਲਾਕਾ ਦੇਖ ਲਓ, ਸਮੈਦਿਕ ਦੇਖ ਲਓ, ਹੈਮਸਵਰਥ ਦੇਖ ਲਓ, ਇੱਥੇ ਗੋਰੇ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਕੁ ਫਿਰਦੇ ਆ। ਗੋਰੇ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਗਾਹਕੀ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਨਾ। ਸੋ ਆਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੀਰੋ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਲੇਟ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਰਤਾ। ਦੇਖੋ ਮੈਂ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ 7:30 ਦਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਦੇ ਕੇ 8:30 ਵਜੇ ਆਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ।
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਸੋ ਮਚ ਭਾਜੀ।
GLS Solicitors is led by award-winning solicitor Harjap Singh Bhangal. GLS Solicitors, when the experts need an expert.